Hi, everybody. I'm Lisa Plaggemier, Executive Director of the National Cybersecurity Alliance. I'm really grateful for all the people who came up to me and said, "Do you remember me? We were on a Zoom call last year." So if I've met you before but don't recognize you because I'm not looking at a screen, then please say hi.
Actually have the lapel mic. Hi, Josh Gordon, work for Steward Healthcare. Let me see if I can turn this down a little. Thanks. It's a privately owned operator of hospitals throughout the United States, and one of the teams I oversee is the security and awareness training. So this is brings joy to me to hear about all this research and stuff that's going on.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I am Juhi, and I'm a security engineering manager overseeing the product security function at Peloton. Peloton as in the bike company. Peloton, as Josh says, but really we deliver a connected fitness experience, and so there's all aspects of security software, the application security side, the connected device security bits of it. And so the engineers that I manage work very closely with product engineering folks and software developers. So a lot of these conversations are pivotal in terms of how we can shift engineering behavior in a preemptive way so that they develop products that are less hackable, quote unquote. So yeah, looking forward to this panel.
Thanks. Everybody. Right, so I guess my first question to all of you is kind of, what have you taken away? What if, as you have listened to today, or even just thought about the research that you know takes place that we haven't had a chance to discuss? Because let's be really honest, this is just a tiny snapshot of some of the incredible research that's taken place just over the last X number of months, let alone in all entirety. But what are the kind of things that you're taking away as you leave?
So I'm super biased because I'm a former CMO. I worked in marketing for Ford on the consumer side, and then I worked in marketing at a security vendor on the B2C side. But I would tell you, like, the one theme that kept running through my mind all day today was we need more marketers and more advertising people. Because when you get into, I mean, no marketer would ever say, yes, you should tell people to do 200 different things. Like, that's just second nature. You know that nobody's going to do any of them. We need more customized, personalized messaging and training. That's something that, if I know we all sort of joke about how much ads follow us around the internet and things like that. That I get one email from our bank, like my newsletter, and my husband gets a different subject line with different articles in different order. I mean, everybody in the marketing space is personalizing everything as much as they possibly can. And what do you think it is that Google does with all that data they collect from us? They sell it to marketers who then turn around and put personalized messaging and advertising in front of us. So I'm super biased, I admit that, but I kept seeing a theme today that we just need more marketing people.
Josh?
Thanks. I guess my big takeaway, especially as a practitioner, is why are we educating people at this point in their careers and such? Shouldn't it be started a lot earlier, especially like when you're in schools and stuff like that? My daughter's 8 years old. She's had a computer at school since 6. And they're becoming more familiar with it, but they have an email address. They send emails to each other. They get some emails. They're surfing the internet and stuff like that. So I think that, as we've learned, it's very hard to teach at this point, and with all the research and why people do it. But I think if you ingrain it at a young age, definitely have a lot easier time.
Yeah, I think I resonate very deeply with the personalized, quote unquote, not in the machine learning sense, which is real personalization or data-driven sense, but really within industry, how we can personalize training for engineers and for quote unquote the technical folks, right? A lot of the times, whatever companies put together as security engineering training is things that you can get off of the internet. And so we have shifted that approach where we look at reactive processes like vulnerability management, where, for folks that are not familiar with vulnerability management, we basically use tools and assessments and, penetration testing to find vulnerabilities in the products that we build. So that's reactive because it's already there now. And then we use that as a feedback loop to see patterns in the kinds of vulnerabilities that are coming out of engineering, and using that as a pipeline into training. So, for example, with API security, we're not giving them generalized content, but rather what are the types of vulnerabilities that our engineers are producing out of the work that they do that is API specific, and how we can train them specifically so that those type of vulnerabilities don't keep coming up. So I resonate very deeply with the personalization of training. And also, yes, with what Josh said in terms of, I think a lot of the secure engineering training should actually happen when engineers are studying in school, and not when they're in industry, and it's kind of on us to teach them that. Yes. Sorry.
In regards to engineers training at school, I'm a member of the CIE board, which is the Cyber Informed Engineering School at National Laboratories, and we're actually working with different universities to try and start building those into their practices. And if you have interest here, I'd invite you to come and speak or come and see the work we're doing to make sure that it's meeting the industry's need.
Oh, I would love to. I actually drove a similar program back in Singapore at my alma mater, where we looked at instead of security engineering being a separate module, how can we incorporate some of that in existing engineering content and academia, essentially. So yeah, I would love to engage and explore that further.
Thank you. So I guess one of the things that I certainly, as I've listened to this, that struck me was the, I guess, constant challenge, in a good way actually, of just connecting people who are researching up with people who are doing, if that makes any sense. And actually, as we've heard already, it's not always as easy as maybe as it should be, or as we would wish it would be. What advice would you give to any researchers who are trying to better get access to practitioners, security leaders, risk executives who have challenges that they live every day but don't necessarily have the time to do the research themselves? What would you offer?
All right, I'm going to be really biased again, and you're going to hate my answer, but they should come to Convene. They, they should come to our event. So we do an event twice a year. The next one is in Seattle in August. Some of you sitting here have spoken at it or been supporters, sponsors of it. But it's a really good chance to have all the training and awareness people in one room and all the vendors that are in the space. So that's the one thing that I was thinking about today was, how do we have I mean, people choose different vendors for different reasons. But it would be great to see more collaboration between the different vendors in the training and awareness space and academia.
I can't believe you thought I was going to hate that answer. Convene is an amazing event, and we love it. And it's and I think the community really does. It truly is a fantastic event that the National Cybersecurity Alliance put on.
Yeah, to follow up on Lisa, what she said is there's a lot of different information security organizations that are out there that have meetings either quarterly, monthly, in-person events usually, such as ISC Squared, ISACA. There's a few others that I won't name. And then there's also the other conferences that you have in the different areas. There was just Secure World up in Boston, and it goes to different places. And, in addition to having various people there of all levels, they're the vendors, they have the vendor booths, and you're talking to a lot of salespeople, but you probably will be able to get in a contact with their marketing team or something, and they can put you into touch with someone else.
Yeah, I think as someone from the practitioner side of things, um, a lot of the times that whatever we're exposed to is coming from, I would say, social media, as in LinkedIn. So we think of whatever is relevant in the industry or whatever is in trend in terms of like tooling or best practices and things from sources that are not coming from academia essentially. And I understand that that's a gap. I understand that we're not necessarily proactive and well integrated, but I think if there's greater outreach of events, I know there are events, but we're not reaching the right audience, especially in terms of like the practitioner part of the crowd. If there's good outreach towards the practitioners and the industry folks, I think there can be better integration going forward, which is a problem area.
One of the things that we've heard here a little bit, and we've also heard actually as a bit of a consistent theme over the last couple of years at Impact, is that ultimately, if we're not achieving the thing that we're trying to achieve, there's more work to be done. But and rather helpfully, we've had a few questions here today where we've kind of challenged some of our assumptions. There are lots and lots of assumptions that we make collectively. What can we do as a community, both practitioners, researchers, and I would add into that policymakers? What can we do to further challenge that? If training doesn't always equal behavior change, if awareness is not enough, as a security leader, or indeed somebody who's worked particularly closely or regularly works with security leadership quite closely, what do we need to do, and how do we as a community make a difference there?
I worry about the people that weren't here today. So how do we attract those folks that are writing those 3-page lists of things to tell your employees? Or I mean, I still see company newsletter articles that are using 10-point font, have no images on them, and the articles are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of words long. Nobody's going to read that. So I think that's the challenge, is how do we attract the people that are kind of stuck in that rut, or maybe they're more IT focused and they're doing awareness with 10% of the time or something, and so they really don't see any problem with just telling people what to do and they should just do it. They're not really interested in human behavior, and like, how do we attract them to this conversation? That's a question, not a solution.
But engineers have personalities sometimes like auditors, they're not really thinking in terms of human behavior or marketing. Maybe a few YouTube videos on how to prepare, effective marketing tools for awareness and training.
Marketing for IT geeks or something.
Now, I just to tack on to that, when we realized that we were not making full use out of our communications team, for example, like they have fantastic ideas, they know how to, lay things out on a page to be kind of visually appealing. So most organizations have a communications person, at least one, so go to them and ask for their help.
Yeah, I agree with that solution, because that's something that we did not think of initially when we were building the security team up and kind of building out our security training, especially that's engineering focused. We were like, yeah, we'll just put together what makes sense to us. But these folks are skilled at understanding how to get specific types of information to a specific audience. And I think the thing that comes before that, even getting the information to them, is the data gathering part, right? Is understanding what do they not know, or how do they consume this information most effectively, and what are their problem areas? So these are not things that we had intentionally, thought about when we were building it out ourselves. So yeah, I agree with that approach that, there are dedicated comms folks in organizations that are really great at this.
Yeah, we actually have a communication person on my team, and she does a lot of the training. We're actually taking our 45-minute training and breaking it up into 4 10-15-minute quarterly sessions. And what's good is that she's not a cybersecurity person. So what makes sense to us might not make sense to the average user. But, I think that's the big question here is because, we run phishing simulations, and we're starting to do more often, and we're tailoring them to different user groups. We're going to try to, for example, like doctors and finance people and such. But, we still see we have such, for exercise, 5%, 6% failure rate on these exams. And, 5 to 6%. And, that may sound great, but all it does is it takes one person to click on something of those 5%, and you're up the creek. One of the other issues that we've had is, we've sent out information, we have newsletters, we have blogs and stuff, and just trying to drive people there is difficult. People, when we send out emails, half the time they don't read them or advisories, so it's just a matter of what is the best approach to try to do that. And one of the things we've actually started to think about is looking into who actually really needs to receive external emails. And if they don't need to receive them, they don't. If they need like one or two separate email domains come in, we allow it. But other than that, we just block all external email
Wow.
for those people.
Wow, that's
Josh, I can see a lot of people getting quite excited at the idea of
Yeah.
blocking an email, volunteering to have their emails blocked. But Josh, you said something that I think might be, again, in the context of research, helpful for us to understand a little bit more. So
Right.
you picked you gave the example of taking some 45-minute training and breaking it down to 10 to 15-minute blocks quarterly. With the aim of doing what is it that you're aiming to achieve by having smaller, shorter emails, and why is that even worth doing?
Just hoping people are able to digest at least one or two things. Because when you're during the workday and you have to sit through or do it at home after hours, this long security training, you're just like, oh, crud. Why do I have to go through this? And, half the time you're just clicking through the buttons and like, oh, okay. And then, there's a 10-question quiz at the end usually.
I'm gonna rush you on just because I know that I reckon this room probably also agrees with you that
Yeah.
shorter is longer. But I guess shorter is better. But I guess my question is, it's probably not just so that they do it. What is it you're ultimately trying to do?
It's just to get people's attention for that short period of time so they learn one or two facts that we want them to maintain.
So knowledge. It's literally just to get them to learn something.
Yep.
The reason I ask this is because one of the things that we're seeing increasingly in the research community is that the ultimate aim is often not knowledge. Actually, it's doing something with that knowledge, and I'm trying to work out how we connect the dots more between ourselves. So I'm interested because I think, again, these are some of the research links that we need to make, which is for practitioners. How do we put an evidence base behind the suggestion that if you know something, you'll do something?
Yeah, question for the panel. Do you have any thoughts about measuring the actual efficacy or effectiveness of training? Like, is it actually working? Is it making us more secure? We've done some stuff ourselves, or we're trying to measure, like, okay, the click rate, our click rate's going down or up, or whatever it's doing. But like, does that mean anything? Like, is it actually effective, or are they being more secure?
So there's a question in O Behave, the report that we do with CybSafe every year, that asks people to self-report on that. We have a list of security behaviors, and we ask which ones have you changed as a result of training that you've had at work or school or wherever. I think the number is like only 6% of people say they haven't changed anything at all. And the top 3 or 4 answers have been consistent the last few years. And when I do that talk, there's a talk I do remotely where we ask, and I've done it for some of the people in this room, I think. We ask your employees some of the same questions that we ask the general public in the survey, and then we compare how your employees answer to the general public. And so I did that probably 80 times last October. And maybe more. And the top couple of answers are almost always the same. The top one is always, I'm better at detecting fish, or I check for fishing. And when you think about that, along with simulated fishing
Right.
programs, like I think that's really effective. The other thing I'd say is that I hear a lot of chatter about attribution. Marketers will call it attribution. Security people just say like, how do we know this awareness stuff, makes sense? Or, why am I spending money on this? Like, how do we know? Even CISA right now is asking the question about their PSA and the campaign they've done. Like, we filmed a PSA and, put it in movie theaters and did other things, radio ads, and do we know it's working? Did anybody change their behavior because of it? Any advertising person will tell you that's impossible. There's anecdotal evidence. When I first started with Ford, living in North Carolina, if we if we won a race, we'd sell more Mustangs or Thunderbirds than the next day. But that's just kind of anecdotal, and like trying to get data and trying to figure out what is exactly the one thing that you said or did, the tactic or the messaging that pushed somebody over the edge to actually change behavior. Like, any behavioral scientist will tell you that's kind of impossible to figure out. Like, it's so that's why I think it's really, really important. It's marketing 101. It's the right message at the right time to the right person. And you have to just lather, rinse, repeat constantly. It has to be a constant drumbeat in the background at your organization that we care about security. Like, this is the type of company that we are. And I think that's really, really important. And then you do all the things all the time to different target audiences. You keep repeating the same information, the same advice. Like, right now, we're sticking as much as we can with those 4 behaviors that we talked about last October and the October before. And guess what? We're going to talk about those this October, and we're trying to talk about them all year long. And because until we see significant movement in those 4 things, we shouldn't stop. We have to keep going until we make progress on those 4 things. If once the whole world is using MFA, we'll stop talking about it and we'll talk about something else instead. But right now, that's still a really key piece of advice. So I think you just have to keep going and look for overall trends, like big picture trends, changes in people's attitudes, changes in people's behavior, but to try and like get down to the nitty gritty of like, what is the thing that we're working? It's usually asked by business or security people who are trying to cut budget. Trying to say like, we don't need to be doing this stuff because we can't tell if it's working.
I would I think it's a brilliant question as well. I think this is ultimately at the heart of what I think an evidence-based approach to managing human risks is, which is the thing that we're doing making any difference? And it is hard sometimes, of
Right.
course, because we're talking about human beings. But if you think about it, I'm not sure that it is anecdotal. If you win a race and sell more Mustangs the next day, there's some hard data that suggests that every time we win a race, we sell more Mustangs. That's not anecdotal. What you haven't worked out is, of course, exactly, maybe necessarily, was it, well, I mean, if it happens every time you win the race, you at least start to hone in on that. But this is one of the things I don't think we should give up on, which is being really specific about what we're trying to do and then measuring whether it happened. This is really rather important because actually I'm not sure it is about cutting. I actually believe as a community, this is actually about potentially doing more. Why would we put all of our effort into this if it's not working when putting more of our effort over here gets us a bit further down the pitch? And so sometimes it's about reapportioning effort, or indeed actually better justifying why we should double down on X or Y. So I'm not saying I disagree with anything. I'm just saying that I love the fact that that's the question at the heart of a community like this. If we're serious about helping people who need our help, we have to be more focused on measuring whether what we're doing is having the impact that we set out to have. Lots of really great stuff. Juhi.
No, I was going to say I agree with a lot of the very thoughtful, data-driven questions and the data-driven points that are being discussed. Because if you measure the right data and you're gathering the right data, a lot of the times you realize that less is more. And we've seen previously that security training at a specific volume and for a specific duration actually desensitizes specific audiences and specific pockets of the organization. So at that point, less is more, because if you bombard people with specific type of doomsday messaging, eventually they'll just be like, yeah, okay, fine, like, I know this already. Stop telling me the same thing. Stop nagging me. So it's how we present it in a way that's quote unquote novel each time, but also in a way that doesn't seem like we're being repetitive and So I think measuring the right types of parameters and gathering the right type of data can really help us get there.
I do have something.
Celia.
So, just following up on what
Juhi, yes.
a lot of times we are bombarding people with the same generic messages across cybersecurity issues, But I think the really important thing is to understand which issues are our issues. Like, we could be telling them to do 10, 15 things, but really our issue might only be 4 of those or 5 of those. So we're wasting time bombarding them with unnecessary instruction when we could really focus on what it is we need to achieve in-house.
Thank you. I'm going to ask, as we keep going out, if you keep speaking up loudly, you've recognized that we've lost a mic as well as a couple of people. So, Calvin, you were going to raise a point, and then there was somebody with a hand up over here, please, and then over here.
One of the points that I want to raise is that I don't think we are asking the right questions. Keep reiterating the same thing: security awareness, communications. This problem we're trying to deal with the human element is hard. I agree with us. We're not doing enough. One of the things I recommend we all do is look at what they've done in other social technical domains that have been very successful. Look at what they've done in aviation. Look what the medical community has done. Sir, you say you work in healthcare. Go find your human factors engineers and invite them into your organization on your team and ask them what they think and what they can help you do to relieve your high friction areas around the human element. That's the only way we're going to see the change that we really want to see. We keep talking about, communication here, communication there. You're overwhelming your employees with unnecessary tasks and different things they're taking on. They're already over. I'll be honest with you, they're fatigued because this is a business that never stops, right? And so we got to find a way. How can we really get after the things that drive friction for our humans? We got to start having that right conversation about reducing friction and solving problems with the human element. Listen to them. They will tell you, here's some things you can do. Everybody should already know how complex your cyber operations are. How you can do that? Simple survey. Ask a question, right? Find out how complex they are, and then start driving simplicity in your organization. The number 2 thing you can do is find out how fatigued, how stressed, distracted your team is. Why? Run an internal survey. They will let you know. These are cheap things that you can do to help drive down your organization. The other thing you can do is find out if you're prioritizing your work correctly. Some people have too much work on them and they are error prone, right? The numbers are that we're not looking at the data correctly. Somebody mentioned it earlier, the 74% around human error. The only way we're going to get back to a number that's more palatable in terms of risk management is to do something about it. I'm hearing a lot of things in here today. We're not really getting there, folks. We got more work to do. How are we going to get there is pay attention to the evidence-based research that's telling us human error, mistakes, lapses, and everything else in cybersecurity has been sustained at a ridiculous level for more than 10 to 12 years.
Calvin, you should definitely tell us what you think about this.
Yeah.
I don't think. I was just like, somebody get him off that fence.
Yeah, one of the things too about the training and everything like that is the cybersecurity insurance companies require that you have that. So
The compliance side of things, yeah.
So
Great.
Yeah,
You
that's
have
very
another
tricky
point
on
at the back or question?
And understanding what actually makes the change stick. I understand looking at other things for sure, but also we do know, we all have mentioned today what actually has changed behaviors, right? We've mentioned social engineering works. There's something in that works that we can definitely extract for our own use. But also understanding, and somebody's also mentioned this, is that it's always changing. It's constantly evolving problem. So understanding that what works this month, what works this year might not work next year, but being able to be flexible and adapt, that's very important. But also we're currently relying on indirect measures of successful learning and, efficacy of what we're doing. But it's harder to get direct measures for sure, but even indirect is still better than no evidence.
Thank you for sharing that. Another human factors postdoctorate over here as well.
I think it is something that changes often and frequently, but we have to be careful not to message the changes too often, because then people just think they have no idea what they're talking about. One day it was do this, the next day it's don't do that. And we kind of lose credibility if we are always telling people different changes instead of messaging the same things that we know work.
Thank you.
Again, one of the biggest things is get back to how do you measure a successful campaign or awareness program? Is it 0 clicks on a phishing email? Is it, as gentleman said, reducing clicks on live emails? I mean, what is the specific measurement? And what is the goal? Or are you just doing it for a checkbox type of thing?
And Josh, is your point that those are the questions we should be asking ourselves before we start with the interventions?
I just think that's something you need to start when you're defining your program, or if you're looking at your program.
Maybe it's not even behavior. Maybe your goal is to change attitudes or to change intentions. Because you might not be, I think what you said was straight on. It's very hard to draw that direct line.
Yeah.
There are other things that Mark.
I think it's things like impressions, and I think there's some really great folks in corporate comms, but I think you really have to look at the consumer world to understand a little bit more about how people consume content and what they pay attention to in the barrage of information that hits all of us all day long. And so I had a VP of marketing years ago who said to me, don't feed him lunch, make him hungry. And there's some fascinating human interest stories in the world of cyber. And we water it all down to just don't click on stuff, instead of drawing people in with better use of storytelling, making sure that you've got a path when you're putting out any sort of awareness content that, if David Ogilvy, father of advertising, when you've written your subject line, or your headline, you've spent 70 cents of your advertising dollar. So if your subject line in your email doesn't get people to open the email, there's internal tools to tell you, even if you're using Outlook, what your open rate was for that, just like a marketer would look at. Or you put a little bit of your article in the company newsletter with a button to click to the portal to read the rest of it, right? Like, you always have a path to keep people clicking and to draw people in. And we have a tendency, I think, in security to just kind of rush straight to the advice, or just kind of push everything out there in one article or one tactic. And we lose that chance to kind of build a relationship with people and get them interested, because there is a lot of stuff in the world of security and privacy that's fascinating. So I'm a big fan of storytelling and getting that kind of engagement, because then that gives you stuff you can measure. I can measure how many people open my email, how many people clicked from the email through to the portal, how many minutes they spent on the portal page, how many other portal pages did they visit when they got there. Like, those are all engagement measures, and those are some indication. I used to use those as an indication of the culture of security in our business.
I think using humor too, you had talked about humor. I'm not familiar yet, but I've written it down to check out. I don't know if anyone remembers So Close. Used to be the most hilarious.
Yeah.
So funny, right? And I would share that on my LinkedIn just to get people engaged.
They're really good.
Yeah, and then there's corporate comedians that do videos about just, kind of poking fun at little things like that. But I think that appeals to all ages. It appeals to everyone. It lightens it, and it doesn't make it so heavy and so, So
I've never had a year when I was doing training awareness, or when I've been at any of the vendors I've been at, or in the job I'm in now, I never had a year where I didn't do one humorous campaign just to get people's attention. And I actually had somebody Slack me once after they reported an incident, or a suspected incident, because of those Pavel videos, it was a game show host named Pavel that we had in this video series. She said, I thought I should tell somebody on the security team about this thing. And I was like, okay, attribution doesn't get any clearer than that. But they were funny.
Yeah.
But it still it just, where people will engage. Yeah.
I think, sorry.
Juhi, please.
I think some amount of data gathering is also not just the metrics, but also what we hear when we engage with the folks on the ground anecdotally, right? When they tell us feedback, like to your point on humor, we did the security engineering training using memes because, they consume so much Reddit content and things like that. And so, just gathering that feedback from them on the ground where they're like, that was actually one of the best technical trainings, like security focused that we've attended, and wasn't just like drab information. So I think being well embedded or having champions within specific departments and crowds that can gather this information anecdotally rather than just metrics that we measure can also drive the success of such campaigns.
I think this is again really helpful because it's exposing not only are there different things that one can measure and different ways to measure it. Actually that gauge that you've described, getting anecdotal evidence, is still a form of measurement. It's not necessarily quantitative, but it is a form of measurement. Is really helpful. Also, one of the things again I'm taking away from this is that sometimes you might want to be changing or influencing what people know. Sometimes it might be wanting to influence what they feel. Sometimes it might be wanting to influence how they behave. And sometimes it might be wanting to influence how engaged they are, which of course you can be engaged in something and still not change your behavior. I think of how many Friends videos I watched when I was at university, and indeed maybe a little bit earlier than that. And I think about how much I laughed. And rather, unfortunately or fortunately, I also think about how my behavior didn't change a huge amount on the basis of that. Actually, humor is a fantastic way of getting people's attention, but not necessarily always the right way to change somebody's behavior. And this is one of the things that's quite interesting. Here's another thing that's particularly interesting about our space, which I'd love to get a thought on. There is a lot of research that suggests that actually communicating with people is not the way to change behaviors all the time at all. In some cases, horrible example, but I'll use it for this audience anyway. Some of you will have come across men's urinals. I sometimes call them urinals in the UK, but here, urinals. You may know that in Europe, I can't remember the name of the organization, but certainly the researcher, Flashmeiger, ended up working out that if you place a fly in the urinal, people aim better, reducing the amount of waste and mess on the wall by up to 18%. Nobody got taught a single thing. Nobody got taught a single thing. Nobody was communicated with about doing that. And the impact was measured. It was good. Yeah. It was, yeah, but my point is they weren't taught. They didn't have a message sent to them. They didn't read anything. Nobody even reminded them. And my point is, say again?
Yeah.
It's actually called a nudge, actually, because it's a choice. It's effectively something that somebody can take up, but doesn't necessarily do to it. It wasn't gamification because there was no score. There was no actually placing them on and there was no competition and there was no board. But the point is, though, gamification is another way in which you might be able to achieve the same thing. The reason this is so interesting, other than the fact that people are looking at me horrified, like, who's that bloke who's just talked to us and put that image in our mind? Apologies for that. The reason I think it's interesting is because in our space, an evidence-based community, one of the things that I think we should be taking away from all of this is, if we come back to what we're trying to achieve, there are potentially lots of different ways it could be done. If we can measure whether we're being effective, we can probably start to find some of those things and share amongst ourselves some of those things that are working, whether or not, providing we provide the context and are being clear. I'm going to ask you for one more thing.
Sure.
If you were to make a request of not just the people in this room, but of course the broader community, as it relates to research, what would that request be? As somebody who either is thinking about security more holistically in your organization, responsible for managing human risk management, security awareness programs, or indeed thinking actually at a national level, that I know that you do a lot, Lisa, as you think about this. What's the request for the research community that we can take away?
I think for me, it would, and the professor in the corner hit on this, and I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, Calvin. We're kind of banging our heads against the wall until the tech sector gets serious about secure by design. So I would love to see more research about that intersection of human factors, and we have to assume people make mistakes. He talked about aerospace. I worked in automotive. You have to assume that people make mistakes and that they could make potentially deadly mistakes. And somehow the technology space has just grown in my lifetime to be what it is without any sort of assumption that bad things were going to happen with all this. First there was the internet. We got that wrong. That was never designed to be secure. Now there's AI, and yeah, we'll just throw it out there and see what happens. Straight out of the mouth of the CEO of Alphabet. Like, we know bad things are happening, but we just want to see what happens anyway. So we're just going to put it out there. I mean, you would never do that with a car or an airplane or anything else. So I think that's like the painful part for me is just more evidence that they need to be taking these things into consideration, because what they're doing is really detrimental to society in a lot of different ways. And like, how do we nudge them into taking secure by design more seriously and all the products that they're building and that all of us are buying?
So the summary is to more research into human factors in order to understand how we get people to take security more seriously from the outset at the design stage.
Yes. Yes. You said it much better than
No.
I did.
Yeah. I love it. It's great.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that when we do these phishing awareness campaigns, even though we kind of try and specialize it to, like, say, the different communities in the organization, as people have been mentioning, people learn differently. So what's effective for one person might not be good for another person. So I think we need some more adaptive training and to really research and understand how to best reach all the different users. Because the one size fit all isn't working.
Josh, I'm going to call you out on something that you've just done there, because I spend a lot of time with security leaders who do exactly the same thing. I asked you what the question was. You just said to everyone, we need some more adaptive training, and then gave the question afterwards. But it sounds like what you're really saying is you want to understand what kind of research we can do in order to work out how to affect different types of people.
Yes,
Is that it?
with adaptive training.
What?
So that the training adapts to them, and that, because when you have 50,000 people organization, you can't just go out and find out how each person.
Got it.
So there are like some vendors that do that today. Depending on how you answer one question, training will determine what questions you get. But this is an example of where I'd love to see the academics collaborate more with the vendors, because there's vendors doing it because maybe intuitively they think it's the right thing to do, but where's the science?
Right.
Yeah.
I'm holding off deliberately plugging CybSafe, but I'm not going to do that today. Juhi.
Yeah, I think my personal interest is really looking at how we can shift engineers' behaviors and that intersection between, human-centered security and engineering, specifically, AI engineering, software development, everything in between, and how we can influence their behavior so we build products and we build services that are that we take to market that are safe. Of course, protecting the organization is one side of or an important part of human-centered security, but also building products that our end users feel safe using. And this is a thing with connected devices, whether it's medical devices, whether it's fitness devices. Security translates to safety a lot of times. So that's really where my interest lies, and that's what I'd love to hear more from the research community in terms of the possible solutions. One being, meet them where they are, catch them when they're still in college, so they're trained to, engineer in a more secure way. So.
And I think also, in addition to like the researchers, we also have to look at it a little more holistically, because a lot of these, as practitioners for companies, we have limited budgets for various for training and other things. Now, that's across the country, and especially as budgets now are getting cut and such. But a lot of the malware and things that are getting developed that people end up clicking on is being developed by nation states and other things. So we're trying to defend ourselves against nation states. So does there come a point where the U.S. government fully becomes, involved in, Big Brother type of thing, monitoring like all the traffic and weeding out bad things and stuff like that, like China and the Great Firewall. But yeah, it's a difficult discussion to have and difficult decisions.
Please join me in thanking the panel for helping us.